Hello everyone. Welcome to my mid lane tier list matchup for Ahri mid lane. I was the rank 1 Ahri player on North America, and I am a challenger player or both on North American server and European server. I used to work as a professional mid lane positional coach and won the Polish league twice, and I also offer coaching for people in general. So I have a decent amount of knowledge on Ahri specifically. I picked up this champion like 3 years ago, and I've played her ever since. I really enjoy the champion. I like how she works, and I will also be releasing a guide soon on her. But this is going to be matchups that we're talking about here. So let's get into it. Lissandra. This matchup probably has to go into hard. The laning matchup itself is actually not that difficult for Lissandra or for Ahri against Lissandra. The issues you start getting into are during the mid game and after level 6. You can usually actually push the Lissandra in, assuming that you have control in your lane with a jungler or something like that. You usually will need to pull your support to mid lane to try to get vision around mid, because that means you can't get ganked. In a completely neutral 1v1, Ahri actually wins this matchup, or she can at least neutralize it. This is the beauty of Ahri, right? If you have a tough matchup that you don't feel like you can really play against and trade and look for kills, you can just push the wave and then just leave. So Ahri, in a lot of ways, can neutralize a lot of bad matchups like that. The problems against Lissandra start arising once you enter the mid game, because what Ahri loves doing is she loves jumping into the enemy team, right? Let me fly in with my ult. Let me ult in and try to kill the enemy. If you ult into a Lissandra and she's in range, you're gonna get hit by boom Lissandra ult and you're dead. You get CC to death and you can't play the game. So that's why this matchup is pretty hard. You either have to take Cleanse, run Banshees, or take Merc Treads and look for really, really good engages. Because if you ever fly in on your own trying to assassinate someone, you're just gonna die. So yeah. I'm gonna start off with Lissandra and hard. Victor's next. Now, if you've ever played Ahri, you know where Victor is gonna go. You might think this is an easy matchup, but this is a super, super hard matchup for Ahri. You can't really beat him in lane. You can't trade with him because of his Q. You can't outpush him because he will zone you off the wave with all of the poke that he has. He's just slowly going to poke you down, and eventually you will just have to take a bad base or give up all pressure in lane and lose minions. The main skill against Victor when you play Ahri is understanding how to trade your health for push, and then pushing to either roam to either of the side lanes or just to recall so you can reset and get full health again. That's kind of the main tool that you have against Victor. And this is a very hard matchup. What I like running against Victor is I like running Spellbook with Resolve secondary with Second Wind, so I don't get poked out as easily. But yeah, this is a very, very difficult matchup. Next we have Syndra. I'm contemplating putting Syndra in even. It's either even or hard. I think we put her in hard and leave her at that. After the nerfs, she's not very hard anymore. She might even go in even because of the nerfs. I honestly don't find that many issues against Syndra. I think it's a pretty even matchup. It is on the Syndra side to make mistakes, but Ahri can definitely look for all-ins against her if Syndra ever misses her E. You can usually just ult on her and 100 to 0 her, or 80 to 0 her. So I think that's not a terrible matchup. Next matchup is Annie. This matchup is either hard or very hard. You just don't really have the tools to eat through her Tibbers. She will just fire her Tibbers on you and you can't really do anything. And then once you enter mid-game, it's also pretty difficult to play against her because of her point-and-click stun, so I think she goes in hard. Let's do Sylas. I actually have Sylas in easy. I think Sylas is not that difficult to lane against. I think it's hard for Sylas to be able to find trades on you as Ahri, as long as you're positioning properly behind minions. Now, the problem you have with Sylas is he can be a lot more useful than you in skirmishes, but when we're talking pure matchup based in the game, I think that Ahri can do quite well against Sylas. You can usually push him in, you can take first strike and then run Liandry's, and you can usually out DPS him in fights as well. But in skirmishes, he's going to be a lot stronger than you and provide more value than you do. But that's not what we're rating here. Let's do Yone next. I think Yone is easy as well. It's a melee champion that has a very clear, a very telegraphed dash onto you. which is lovely for Ahri. That means you can just charm him out of his dash and you're fine. As long as you don't walk up while he has 3 Q stacks, or you don't walk up while your charm is on cooldown, you should be fine. If he jumps on you, you can charm him, you can Q, and you can W away, and you're usually safe. These are all matchups where if you're not comfortable playing very aggressively and trying to trade with them, you can also just fall back on the method of, well, I don't have to fight these champions, I can just push, which is what Ahri does, right? You can just push if you want to. Akshan next. I think Akshan's hard. Um, he's hard in the isolated 1v1. Once you start entering the mid game, you can do a lot more things, but most champions really struggle against Akshan in lane. You kind of need your jungler to be able to come mid lane and help. If you get a single gank or maybe 2 ganks and Akshan dies on one of them, you can start solo killing him pretty easily. This champion needs to stay ahead to win, but if he's a good Akshan player and doesn't fall behind, or you don't get jungle assistance, it can be very rough for you. Aurelion Sol. Very easy. This matchup is extremely easy. The only problem that you're gonna find is that Aurelion Sol might just straight up outvalue you once you get to the later stages. So it is on you to start closing out the game early, and you have to find roams that work, but you can have all the priority in the world that you want. Just be very, very careful, and this is a mistake that I see a lot of Ahris make, especially when I'm on the Aurelion Sol side and playing Aurelion Sol. If you ever use your charm, be aware that Aurelion Sol can just W on top of you and you have no way of stopping him from killing you. He will just W in your direction and start fucking firing his Q at you, and there's not a lot you can do about that. But as long as you look out for that, you're fine. Akali, again, melee assassin that you can push in and you can take first strike and run Liandry's against. Same as Sylas, it's pretty hard for her to trade with you. You can push her in and you can just roam on the map. It's not like you're going to be killing any of these champions in lane, but you'll be pushing them in, which is essentially what you need to do as Ahri. These matchups are all matchups that you can easily get push in, even if you're not winning trades. Cho'Gath. I think Cho'Gath is very easy. You can run first strike and take Liandry's, and it's kind of the exact same thing as these 3 champions, except he's just pushing more. Gragas. I think Gragas is easy as well. You can dodge his Q with your W movement speed. Let's get on to the hard ones. Yasuo. Extremely, extremely difficult for Ahri to lane against. Mostly because of his win wall. He can dash on you. So you know with Yone, right, you have the option of, oh, well, if he dashes towards me, I can just charm him out of his dash and he can't trade with me. Yeah, Yasuo removes that entirely. Now you can't stop him from dashing on you because he's just gonna block your charm with a wind wall. So the way you have to play this is you have to just pray that the Yasuo is not very good, and so you can just push. Otherwise, you have to let Yasuo get the push, and there's not a lot you can do. You have to play to set up ganks, or you have to give up waves to roam, which sucks. Azir. Very hard or hard, I wonder. Very hard makes sense just because he also outscales you. I think the old Azir I would put in very hard. This Azir maybe goes in just hard because he's not quite as strong in lane anymore. He got a lot of his power shifted away from his early game laning, and now it's more towards the mid to late game with his soldier DPS. So I think it's fine putting him in hard. Zed either goes in hard or even. I think you can put Zed in even. Mostly because he has no real tools of killing you. So the way this matchup works is Zed will use his WEQ on you, and that should give you an opportunity while he's on cooldown to push out the wave. And then if you got hit by the WEQ and you're now half health, you can push out the wave and just take a base and come back into the lane with full health, and you're fine, and you can repeat. And if you didn't get hit by the WEQ, you can just start roaming now. If he ults on you, you can always charm him out of it. You can always charm behind yourself to hit him as soon as he spawns, and then you can ult away if need be. So he should have no real tools of killing you. Corki, I think he just goes into easy, maybe even very easy. He doesn't do a whole lot early, right? You can just push him in and roam. Like, the champions that you're gonna find up here are champions that make it very difficult for you to push and roam, and the champions you're gonna find down here are champions that you can either push very easily against and roam, or you can take all-ins and trade with them. Or both, right? Kassadin. I think I put Kassadin very hard. Or maybe hard. As a matchup, it's not super hard. The problems just start arising around level 11, right? Like that's when Kassadin gets 2 points in ult, and you can't really match him anymore. Neeko, I think Neeko is very hard. She's gonna poke you out. She also stylistically counters you. If you jump in during a team fight, you're gonna get eat in your face, and it's gonna be very hard to play against her. The amount of poke that Neeko has is absolutely absurd. You have to again use this style of, well, I will just accept that I will lose minions to try to push and get decent resets to not bleed too much, or push and try to get roams. But there's not a whole lot of tools you have against Neeko, to be honest, as Ahri. Anivia. This one I'm actually a little bit stumped on. Because I think this matchup is actually pretty hard for Ahri. I think against a good Anivia might even go into very hard. Or game dependent. But I don't think it's that game dependent. I think every single time you're playing against an Anivia as Ahri, you kind of hate your life. Yeah. Mostly because she's gonna place a big ass snowfield on you and you have no way of stopping that, and she gets to push before you get to push, and that's what Ahri wants to do. Ahri wants to be the first one pushing so you can move. And Anivia kind of takes that away from you. Irelia. I think this is game dependent. I think Irelia will always be game dependent. If you have a jungler that can come mid lane and gank Irelia, then it's gonna be a very easy game. If you have a full clearing jungler against an Irelia as Ahri, she's very, very hard. Because you can't beat her 1v1. It is very jungle dependent. Fizz. Fizz might go into hard actually. Hard or even, I'm not sure. Because he has tools to trade with you and he can get priority quite easily. You can charm him out of his queue if you're fast enough, but that's pretty difficult to do. It's either hard or even, to be honest. I think I'm gonna put him in even. Maybe hard actually. Yeah, let's put him in hard. Good Fizz players make it very miserable for you to push as Ahri. Which again, if you can't push as Ahri, you kind of hate your life. Cassiopeia. I think this is game dependent. Again, I think it comes down to jungler. The matchup itself is not terrible for Ahri. You have tools to trade with the Cassiopeia, and you can set up your lane in a certain way that Cassiopeia can't trade with you as easily. You have to kind of whittle her down a little bit early and use your W to dodge her Qs. That's about it. But if you get ganked once, the lane just shifts, and Cassiopeia gets a bit too tanky for you to be able to do anything. Galio, very easy. Same as Cho'Gath. You just take first strike and you take Liandry's and you push him in and he cannot trade with you. If he tries to E towards you, you charm him. He has no way of playing the game. Diana. I actually haven't played against Diana. I'd imagine the matchup isn't too bad. I imagine it's just like the same as Sylas and Akali. She can't trade with you that easily and you can push the wave. Echo. Echo is either easy or even. I think I'm gonna put him in even. Just because once he starts getting towards the same spike as you get to as Ahri, which we all know at level 7, level 9, Ahri can one-shot the wave quite easily. Echo can kind of do the same. So he's kind of just matching you in terms of roaming. Early game, you can kind of bully him a little bit and get a CS advantage. And then once you start getting to around level 7, level 9, Echo can start one-shotting the waves. And if you're playing against good Echoes, they can even find trades on you. And they're going to try to bait you in certain ways. So I think it's kind of even. Jace, even as well. Ahri has good tools to set up ganks on the Jace. It might be game dependent as well, but even without jungle assistance against Jace, you can just neutralize the lane. Jace can't really gain an advantage on you as Ahri. You can usually get priority and shove him in and look for roams. And if you have a jungler that comes mid lane, you can usually gain advantages. Which is how I'm defining this, right? If it's even, with no jungle interference, it's even, you don't lose. But if you have a jungler, you can gain advantages on him. Graves? I haven't actually played against Graves in quite a while. I don't think the matchup is hard. I think it's actually pretty easy now that I'm thinking about it. Because again, it's the same thing. You can push him in. And if he tries to dash on you, you charm him and you run away. It's not that difficult. Karthus. I like playing against Karthus as Ahri. He can't do a whole lot to stop you from pushing again. If a Karthus player is good, however, I think this matchup can be pretty hard for the Ahri. Karthus can take exhaust, which he usually should, and he can force some pretty brutal trades against you. during the early stages. If you can get through those, then usually you have enough support with a jungler to be able to kill the Kathas once you get your Everfrost and once you get your ult and tier 2 boots, to a point where I think the matchup isn't that difficult. Again, the problem will just be Kathas will outvalue you in later stages. So you have to make something happen early, which can be difficult because Kathas can force all-ins against you. But the lane itself is not that bad, and the matchup itself is not that bad. What is bad is Karthus can outvalue you during the later stages. But the matchup itself is not that difficult. Katarina, it's either even or hard, I think. Um, Katarina is pretty tough if she's good. You just play a very non-interactive style against her. It's one of those matchups where you can't trade with her. Because if you trade with her, she will win. So you just have to push. And that's what a lot of these matchups are. LeBlanc, I think LeBlanc is hard. Um, she can trade with you without you really being able to do a whole lot back. This is before, or I haven't played against LeBlanc since Static Shiv, so I don't know how difficult it is now. It's probably a lot more non-interactive now. But the really annoying part about playing against LeBlanc is she will just Q auto you on repeat. She doesn't even have to W onto you, because if she Ws towards you, you can beat her by charming, right? But if she never Ws, she will just slowly poke you down, and there's not a lot you can do. Lucian, very hard. Very, very difficult to play against Lucian. Um, this champion is super, super strong against Ahri specifically. He can poke you out, he can push you in, he can stop you from doing what you want to. But, much like the other matchups, if you get one jungle gank and manage to kill him, you can kill him on repeat. But I think the matchup itself is very hard. Or it should go into hard, just because you can snowball. Rise, pretty hard, if not very hard. He counters you in lane and he stylistically counters you. He will always have to push first, because if you walk up and try to trade with him, he can just blow half of your health. And once you start entering mid-game and team fight stages, it's very difficult to play against him as well, because if you jump in, he's gonna root you, in which case you get one shot, right? That's what you're gonna notice. A lot of these champions are either very, very difficult for Ahri to deal with in lane, or they stylistically counter her, and are also difficult for her to deal with in lane. Lux. It might actually be hard. Let me think. Lux, it's pretty hard. She can poke you out. You can set up ganks quite easily. You can look for all-ins. You have to play this matchup pretty aggressively. If you get hit by one Lux Q, you're probably losing all lane pressure or dead, which makes the matchup pretty difficult as well. I think I'm happy placing it in even, though. I don't think it's as hard as these other champions. I think you have some counterplay against it, in the form that you can set up ganks and you can dodge her binding, and then you can push her in, because you have lower cooldowns than she does. Malzahar, the matchup itself is pretty easy. You can push him in, and there's not really a whole lot he can respond with. The only problems start arising once junglers get into the mix, so I might put him in game dependent. It's one of those champions that would be very easy, but because he can set up ganks very, very easily, and he also does pretty well against you during the mid game, I think it's closer to game dependent. But early game, you absolutely blast this guy. Orianna. Yeah. Yeah, she's pretty hard. It's very, very tough to deal with. She will poke you. She'll make it very hard for you to play the game. She will outscale you as well. She can set up ganks on you. She will just slowly whittle you down. You have to take all-ins against her. Actually, she's not as bad as Victor and Nico, so maybe I'll put her in hard instead. But she is tough to deal with as Ahri. I don't think she's quite as hard as Victor, though. So, I think Victor and Yasuo are your two hardest matchups as Ahri, by the way. Kayle, very easy. She does nothing early. You just push her in. Or you can freeze on her as well. This is one of the matchups where I actually like freezing. These melee champions, Sylas, Akali, I usually like freezing against as well during the early stages, because you can get CS advantages. I think Kayle you can freeze against as well. Ahri. This matchup is very, very difficult and very, very hard. And if you want to learn more about it, you can reach out to me on Discord for coaching. I provide coaching for $35 for 90 minutes, and I can help you improve at League of Legends. No, I'm joking. Not about the coaching part, but about the Ahri being hard. But you're never going to play against Ahri unless you play blind pick, in which case, why are you looking at a tier list? It's not like it's not like you can choose who you're playing against there. Pyke. I haven't played against Pyke in a long time, but I think he's pretty easy from when I played against him. I played against Davemon on North American servers, who's commonly considered the best Pyke in the world. I didn't think it was that difficult of a matchup. Pyke doesn't really have a lot of tools to really kill the Ahri, but again, you could say it's game dependent, mostly because Pyke doesn't lane. He just leaves the lane and tries to roam. And if he gets his roams off, he wins. If he doesn't get his roams off, he loses. Qiyana. Easy. Yeah. She doesn't have a lot of options to really kill you. You can charm her out of most things. Early game, you're winning very, very hard. Although I will say, if you make a mistake, when the wave starts bouncing back into you, so what the most common mistake against these assassin champions, Qiyana, Talon, Tryndamere, these types of champions, is you will push them under tower, right? And then you will harass them under tower. And then the wave will start slow pushing back into you. And all of a sudden, for some reason, you think that you can still trade with them, despite them actually having hit level 3 and having a bigger wave than you. And they will jump on you, they will trade with you, and they will either kill you, or they will take half of your health and you can no longer lane. That is the most common mistake I see against these champions. If you don't make that mistake, these champions are pretty easy to deal with. You can poke them out, you can charm them from range, and you can just push them in. Renekton. I think Renekton is pretty easy, to be honest. I don't think he has a lot of tools to really beat you. If he tries to dash towards you, you charm him. Otherwise, you can run First Strike and Leandries and just farm him and just get your items faster. Rumble. Gonna put Rumble in even. He's not very easy to deal with in lane. But once you start getting your Lost Chapter, you can just start shoving him in. This is, again, one of these matchups I would take First Strike against him and just try to farm him. And then get my Leandries and just push him in and deal a lot of damage in fights and try to outvalue him that way. Seraphine, easy matchup. It's just a worse control mage early game. She will outvalue you late game, but it's up to you to make something happen before that. Set, he's very easy. It's kind of the same idea as Renekton. He has no way of getting on top of you, and you can just shove him under tower. I'm not even going to do Singed. Talon, very easy as well. Maybe easy for some lower MMR players. These matchups, by the way, can all switch depending on what MMR you are at, what elo you play in. Because I can imagine Zed is pretty hard to deal with at lower MMR, so he might be up in very hard. But at the level that I play at, this is kind of the way I feel about matchups from my experience. Tryndamere, I think Tryndamere is even to hard. This champion can be pretty rough for you in lane, actually, but you kind of have enough tools to avoid getting killed by him, and it's hard for him to find an all-in against you. But he can just ignore you. But you can match him during the mid game. You're one of the few mages from mid lane that can actually match Tryndamere in side lane and make his life pretty miserable. So he might actually go into easy, now that I'm thinking about it. Twisted Fate. It's even or easy. You can kind of push him in as much as you want, and there's not a whole lot he can do to respond. Veigar. I would put Veigar in hard. The matchup itself is not too difficult. It's the constant... He might be game dependent, actually. It's the constant fear of, well, if he places a box here and the enemy jungler is there, I am just dead. Sucks. Not a lot I can do about it. You kind of have to call his bluff, otherwise you're just going to let him take all the pressure in the lane, or you have to get your jungler to come mid whenever you want to try to get priority. Vel'Koz. I think Vel'Koz is pretty easy. Immobile control mage that doesn't really have any tools to stop you from diving on him and killing him. Just the worst Syndra, to be honest. Vex. Vex is pretty hard, mostly because of her passive. Makes it pretty difficult because if you try to jump onto her, you're just getting W feared in the head and she will fire all her abilities on you and you will lose half of your health. Makes it pretty tough to deal with. Also, whenever you ult, she has her passive proc on you, which kind of sucks. Viego? Honestly, very easy. Like, what tools does Viego have to deal with you, right? Like, why are we even talking about lane Viego? Get that out of here. Vlad. Mm, I think Vlad is even. Mostly because you can dictate whenever you want to trade with him. And if you don't want to trade with him, you can just push him in and try to roam. He will again outscale you and outvalue you in fights. Xerath is actually pretty hard for Ahri. I will actually put him in game dependent as well. Mostly because if you can get jungle ganks, you can kill him very easily, and all it takes is for you to kill him once. And then you can kill him on repeat. But if you don't get jungle ganks, he will just slowly whittle you down, and there's not anything you can do about it, because you can't take an all-in, because he has his E that he can stun you with as soon as you dash. And if you don't have a jungler to help you, you just lose. You will just get poked out and pushed in. Ziggs. I think Ziggs is even. Maybe he's even in hard, actually. Huh. I think you can push him in if you want to, though. And you can just decide to push him in and get jungle ganks if you need to. It's kind of like Xerath. Maybe he just goes in game dependent as well, to be honest. But you don't need jungle ganks as much against Ziggs. You can kind of push him in a lot more easily. He doesn't have the same tools to poke you down as Xerath does. So I think I'm happier placing him in game dependent. Zilean, very easy. He doesn't have any tools to kind of stop you from pushing and trading with him. Zoe. Well, I mean, I hate playing against Zoe, so for me, she would go up in very hard here. I hate playing against Zoe as a champion in general. I don't really like it, but as a champion, I think she's probably just even. You can prevent trading with her and just push the wave. Both of you will just AFK push the wave, and there's not a whole lot to do. If she tries to step up to trade with you, you can fire a charm at her, and then you can take a trade and then back off. We're missing Talia, but Talia would go in game dependent as well. Same with Swain. These two champions would go in game dependent because it kind of depends. If they have a CC jungler with those two champions, it gets pretty rough. But yeah, that is the tier list. Let me know what you guys think. If you have any thoughts on it, if you have different experiences with matchups, or if any matchups are not on here that I haven't mentioned, feel free to let me know down in the comments. And if not, then please do leave a like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. It helps me actually see that I'm making content that people want to watch, which is what I enjoy doing, and I love teaching people. And also, if you do need coaching, reach out to me on Discord. It's just Shori, and you can add me on Discord and message me, and we can figure something out. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed, and have a good one. See ya. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.